Let's get started. I'm gonna have to start calling on people. Please take your seats. All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Sergio Pareja, and I am the current dean of UNM School of Law until July 1st. Thank you. I want to start by thanking everyone here this evening, both in this building and watching remotely. We've got actually a very large number of people watching this online as well, and joining us to celebrate the life and legacy of Dean Fred Hart. Now, every one of us here owes Fred a tremendous debt for molding our law school into the diverse and caring community that it is today. Now, Fred became dean here in 1971, and he immediately embarked on a mission to transform this law school into the place that it is today. Now, first, I'd like to start also with a warm round of applause, thanking Bob Desiderio, Peter Winograd, and Natalie Martin for putting together today's program. I'd also like to thank the speakers who will share their memories of Fred, two of whom traveled here from Colorado and California to be with us. So a round of applause for them as well. I would also like to say a special thank you to the Hart family. Thank you for allowing us to celebrate your father's and grandfather's commitment to our law school community, and for both sharing Fred and Joan with all of us over all those years. Lastly, and most importantly, I'd like to thank Fred for the care and concern he showed to literally thousands of students over the 50 years that he taught at this law school, for the way that he embraced and welcomed every new faculty member when we joined this law school community. And I speak from personal experience. I taught contracts my first semester teaching here, and every day before class, I would sit in Fred's office learning how to teach contracts from Fred. For his example of being a great leader, for his example of being a great husband and father at the same time as being a great leader, for his fierce advocacy on behalf of so many students and underrepresented groups, and for making this law school unlike any other, one where diversity is celebrated and where it is our ongoing goal to eliminate the barriers to a high-quality legal education. Now, I'd like to turn things over to Professor and Dean Emeritus Bob Desiderio, or as most of us know him, Desi, who is going to be our MC this evening. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sergio, and I apologize for my slowness of having to get up and down 9 times. I also welcome everyone, especially the Hart family, with us. But isn't it marvelous that we can come together and not have to do this by Zoom? Yes, yes. Excuse me a minute. As I look out to you all, I see so many students, present and former, colleagues and friends of Fred and Joan. Right? Your presence here is a testament to them and what they meant not only to the law school, but to each of us with it. We've come here today to remember Fred. We want to celebrate his life by sharing our memories and stories. Fred impacted each of us, right? And he changed our lives. And today, we want to remember his gifts, especially his gift of himself to us. Okay. As the program indicates, there will be 6 speakers who were either prior students, colleagues, friends, and Michael, Fred's grandson, and a prior student, all right, who will share their memories and stories of Fred. I will introduce each of them as they come forward, but my introduction, by necessity, must be very, very short. If not, we would be spending the whole day here. I will try to provide enough information so that you all understand each special relationship to Fred and what Fred meant to each of them. When their comments are completed, then we will ask the audience to share their comments and stories of Fred. Remember, we are here to celebrate the life of our friend, of our mentor, of our colleague. And that person who brought us here and who made us in the law school what we are. I'd like to begin with Philip Sam Deloria. Wait a minute, don't go. Get him. You're too anxious, Sam. Sam was the director, president of the American Indian Law Center here for 35 years. There's a little history, though. We all know that one of many Fred's great achievements was the design and the establishment of this special program for American Indian students. When Fred became dean, he asked Sam to take it to become the administrator, and Sam did. And in the following year, Sam became the president of the American Indian Law Center. And for those 35 years, he advocated for what became the leading institutions dealing with Native American students and service to tribes and pueblos throughout the country. Sam, it's your time.
Thanks, Desi. Boy, the Hart family's bigger than I thought. Reader's Digest used to have a feature called My Most Unforgettable Character. Fred Hart and Joan were my most unforgettable characters. There are probably others, but I don't remember who they are. So. I want to thank the committee for inviting me. This is probably the greatest honor in my professional life, to be not only asked to speak on this occasion, but to be the lead-off hitter. I'm, of course, not up to the task, but it's too late now. I'll tell you in somewhat more detail the origin story. It's not an origin myth. I got this from Fred repeatedly for 30, 40 years of banquets that he would come to and tell the story. I met Fred at some conferences in 65, 66, 67 when he got in the program. And he said, why don't you come to this program? Well, I don't know, I'll see, Fred. And we got to know each other. And later he told me the story that Tom Christopher, the dean of the law school, had called him in. Fred was here on a sabbatical from Boston College, was going to spend the year working on the Uniform Commercial Code. It sounds like a really thrilling year in New Mexico, doesn't it? Tom Christopher called him in and he said, you know, as long as you're out here, you ought to do something a little different. And we have one Indian student here, and there are only 15 in the country that we can find, and fewer than 25 lawyers. And so, why don't you put together a program to get some Indian students prepared for law school? No, I want to work on the Uniform Commercial Code. So he went home and told Joan about it. Big mistake. I won't try to characterize their marital communications, other than to say the next morning Fred went back and said, is it too late? Can I do it? So he did it. They got funding from the Upward Bound program, and he put the program together, and as he told the story, he consulted. Oh, he also told Tom Christopher, I don't know anything about Indians, and I don't care. He always used to like to say that. And I don't care either. You know how tough he was. He consulted all the experts, and they said, well, if you're going to do that, you're going to need, and this is Fred's words, you're going to need, each student is going to need an anthropologist holding one elbow and a psychiatrist holding the other elbow. Ooh, it's more, I guess I don't know anything about Indians. So that kind of, you know, the old culture shock thing that people talk about. Fred made some key, brilliant decisions. Decision number one, ignore the experts. He said, and again, paraphrasing Fred, I decided to go with what I know. I know legal education. I don't know anything about Indians. But I do know that anybody who's a decent teacher has to be sensitive to the situation of each student. So why is this any different for these people? That was brilliant. A lot of times when people are, academics especially, who somehow miss the day in class where they teach you how to say, I don't know. When you try to talk to them about an Indian issue, they immediately say, oh, this is just like, and then they think it's exactly like something they know something about. Or they say, this isn't like anything I know, I don't want to know about it. Well, Fred had enough sense to know that it's just like some things and not like other things, and he's going to go ahead with what he knew, so he did. Key decision number 2 was not to make it a separate program. In those days, you know, you'd get money from an OEO program, and you'd hire a staff, and you'd do this. And most of the time, even now to now, you'd get money to, you watching that 5 minutes? That's a long time. You get money to do a particular program and deal with a particular problem. Instead of dealing with it, you hire people to go to meetings to talk to each other about what the problem is, and you never actually do anything. So it could have been that they'd just hired some couple of young Indian people with a degree and sent them out to colleges saying, now you all ought to go to law school. He decided that he was going to run this program, and it wasn't going to be a separate program. He put Hunter Gear in charge. I wish Hunter was here. How is he? Hunter Gear was the assistant dean. He put Hunter in charge of it, and not the whole program. He said, you're in charge of placement. And that was an absolutely brilliant decision, because if they had hired non-lawyers to run the program, they would have had zero credibility with admissions people when they were placing them in law schools. Now, mind you, this is 1967. He was doing this. Law school admissions was highly competitive, and they were trying to place people in schools at the end of July for that fall. Now, that's a hell of a, even now it's hard to do. So he put Hunter in, and Hunter spoke Assistant Dean ease. He could talk to these people, these assistant deans. He had the credibility, of the program and of Hunter as an assistant dean was at stake. And that is probably one of the best decisions Fred made. He could assure them that this was not a powder puff program. This was a program that was going to replicate to the degree possible the first semester of law school, where even the smartest kids are bewildered. Not as much as they should be. This turned out to be vitally important because law school admission was almost totally dependent on GPAs and LSAT scores in those days. This was an alternative assessment. Hunter could call and say, I don't care what the GPA was. They're going to lousy schools and they went to lousy high schools. I don't care what their LSAT score was. Those things are culturally biased anyway. We will tell you how they do at law school speed in 8 weeks, and you base it on that. First time that ever happened. And a brilliant thing on the part of both Fred and Hunter. I'm going. This became a national model. It was copied. During that same summer, people came down and talked to Fred and Hunter from other schools. It was a model for the Clio program, which, because it was bigger, was more famous. We existed before Clio. Over the years, over 90% of the people who go to that program and finish the program and enter law school, over 90% graduate from law school. Now, if you can show me a law school in this country where 90% of the people who walk in the first day graduate 3 years later, I'd like to see that school, because there aren't very damn many of them. The program's the most successful in the history of Indian education. But more than that, Fred Hart, by starting this, pushing over the first domino, changed Indian life, Indian communities. They always say change forever. What? That's a stupid. Changed and then unchanged? Come on. He changed Indian communities. He changed the Indian law community, federal Indian law community. But beyond that, he changed legal education because he loosened up this silly preoccupation with LSAT and GPA. Not that they're irrelevant, but they're not the whole story. That's quite an accomplishment for a guy that did that because his wife told him he had to instead of. So he changed the country in an important way. Now, of course, other things had to be ready to go, but that's Fred Hart. Just a couple more things. I'm getting there, Desi. He brought changes to the law school, which other people will talk about, hiring women and minority faculty, clinical program, open door policy. I think this was the first. I don't think there's anybody still alive who was there the day Fred became dean, or at least still in this room. But as I recall, he's the guy who said to the faculty, don't be like other law school faculties and sit in there with your door closed pretending you're doing scholarship. You leave your damn doors open. So this is for the students. They're supposed to be able to walk in and talk to you. I hope that's still in effect. And I saw one of these things flashing up there of a woman saying she brought her baby to class first day and contracts, and the baby made a fuss, and Fred said, don't worry about it. I remember in this room at a graduation, he announced, do not take crying children out of this building. This is as much for them as it is for anybody else. I want them here. You know, that's the kind of guy he was. He was modeled, no, it's the other way around. The TV character Lou Grant was modeled after Fred Hart. Snarling, grumpy old bastard, and just melting. Every time he told the origin story of the pre-law program, he got to the point where he told Tom Christopher that he didn't know anything about Indians and didn't care, and he'd choke up every single time. I thought, Fred, it's getting old, man. Everybody knows you're going to choke up. He would still choke up. He was a remarkable guy. He never had to explain anything to me, but somehow he taught me a lot. All this thing about his strategies and all of that, he'd kind of throw it off in half a sentence. He hired me, then he couldn't get rid of me, but he never once expressed to me his regret for having done so. I'm sure the rest of the faculty wondered why he did that, but I'm most grateful to him to give me a chance to sit here for 37 years and try to think deep thoughts. And so I want to thank Hunter and the many staff members of the school who absorbed the extra work of supporting the Law Center and its programs over the years. Cheerfully, maybe not as thrilled as they might have been otherwise. And I want to thank Fred, and Joan, and you all who asked me to speak. On behalf of my most unforgettable character, Fred Hart. Yeah. I knew it would come to me.
Thank you, Sam. Our second speaker is John Eckerhart. John was in the first special pre-law program and was the first Native American student to graduate from this law school. He was also SBA president when he graduated in 1970. And I remember fond memories because I was a relatively young professor at that time with it. After John graduated from law school, he immediately went to a newly formed organization called the Native American Rights Fund in Boulder, Colorado. And John has been there ever since. And since 1977, he has been the executive director of probably the leading advocacy group in the country for Native Americans. John, welcome, and we thank you.
Thank you, Desi. It's really good to be invited to be here today and talk about Professor Fred Hart. And I didn't know him as Dean because he didn't become Dean till I was gone. But you know, you all, he's Dean to you. But Fred was really a great man and meant a whole lot to me. I was in that first Pre-Law Summer Institute class and got to meet him and his wife Joan, and the family really bonded with us Native American students kind of right from the start. You know, poor, hungry Indian law students, and they would invite us over to their house to eat dinner, and the whole crew, all the Hart kids, would be serving us all this great food. And we did that many, many times, and us Indian law students just really, really appreciated that. And they really took good care of us all the time I was here, all those 3 years. The Pre-Law Summer Institute also was so special because it was my first exposure to federal Indian law. UNM became, I think, the second law school in the country to start teaching federal Indian law. And Fred had reached out and found materials and got us going, and we looked at this stuff, and wow, we didn't know all this, look, you know, and how come this isn't happening back on the reservations, and start learning about the legal process and how lawyers cost money, and we're poor, and we don't have any lawyers and stuff. And so this is kind of what we picked up in law school, studying federal Indian law. He helped us get some experience in that area. He helped me get my first summer job after my first year out at California Indian Legal Services, one of 7 legal services funded programs representing Indians, and that was a great experience. Actually, getting involved in some cases and things and seeing the issues. And then the second year, he had contacts in Washington, D.C., the Interior Department, Solicitor's Office, Indian Affairs. I got to go to Washington. He got me a job in Washington. And I got to see the whole thing, and wow. And then on graduation time the next year, he helped me reach out and get a Reginald Heber Smith Fellowship that I could use to go to work anywhere. And I still remember that California experience, and they were starting that Native American Rights Fund, and boy, that's what I wanted to do, so that's where I got to go. And he helped me do that too. I mean, he was just really doing all these things to help us learn about our tribes and the federal Indian law issues. He really cared a lot. He also helped me with expenses and things. I had a wife and son, and we were really poor. Her folks lived in Wisconsin, and we can't go see them for Christmas. And Fred said, wait a minute. And he found a way to get us out there, and she just really loved that. Fred and Joan were just such good keepers of all of us during that time. I was really honored in 1989, the 100th anniversary of the University of New Mexico, and there was, of course, a big celebration here, and lots of speakers at a big event, and Fred calls up and says, I want you to come and be a speaker at the 100th anniversary of the University of New Mexico as the first Native American graduate of the law school. And I was really honored, and I remember in the introduction he told the crowd about me, and he said the one thing that made him different from the other students was he was serious. Oh, I was? Anyway, I just really appreciated that opportunity that Fred gave me to be part of the 100th anniversary. As he said, I went to work for the Native American Rights Fund, and we've been involved in most of the major Indian rights litigation the last 52 years, and it's just really changed everything. Like Sam said, it's changed the whole country. It changed our tribes and the states and the federal government, and international implications as well on indigenous rights. It's just really changed everything, and it all started, with Fred and that first PLSI back in '67. He was a great man. He really cared about our people, and every time I think about everything that's happened among our people, it's been driven by this modern-day Indian sovereignty movement. I think of Fred, and he's kind of the guy that started it all. All the lawyers that got produced through that program just started out with a handful, like Sam said, and now we're almost 3,000. Proportionally represented in the legal profession, finally, and it started right here with Fred. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The other thing I remember, John, is you did graduate before Fred became dean and before we had this building. Some of the older grads out there I can see is John graduated in the old Bratton Hall, which was on main campus, which is now sociology with it. Right? And every once in a while, we remember those days. Our next speaker is Marcia K. Head Hardiman. All right. Marcia is a 1977 grad of the law school. She was SBA president, and prior to that, she was president of the Black Students Association with it. I think I was associate dean during part of that time, because I remember Marcia as this person who brought enthusiasm all the time and excitement and baked goods, right, to the law school. First as gifts to the faculty, right? And then you sold them. After Marcia left the law school, she worked with the city for many years, both as personnel director and as director of the Albuquerque Convention Center. She then started her own management consulting firm, and now is a professor in the Africana Studies Department at the university. Marcia?
I told you I could do that, Sonia. I just recently had hip replacement surgery, so I've been making everybody nervous. But I keep telling them, the physical therapist says, movement is healing, so we are moving. Thank you, Desi. Thank you, Dean Pareja. Thank you to the law school. I cannot begin to tell you how privileged and honored I feel to have been invited with this esteemed group of stars from the law school to be one little speaker. I honestly just look at this space and I'm just overwhelmed with memories. The old moot court room, now the Leo Romero room, yeah, aptly. I remember first year walking into this space just a few months after we had begun, after the first night of the airing of Roots. And I remember thinking with my big Angela Davis afro, I dare these people to say any one thing wrong to me today. They didn't. I remember our first political victory, a combination of caucuses of minority students and the Women's Law Caucus that elected me the first woman and the first black person as the Student Bar Association president. That was historic in 1970. Thank you. Couldn't have done that without all of my friends. I remember right back in that little space where the platform was set up, our graduation right here in the forum. Very funny. My big Angela Davis afro. I was very pregnant with my first child in '77. Dean Hart looked at me holding my cow and said, "How am I going to do that?" And we looked at each other and I stooped down and he cowed me and we moved on. Honestly, so many memories. I couldn't begin to name them. So as I thought about this, to be respectful of the time, to be obedient, I began to think, because I'm a motor mouth, and as I wrote things down, God just gave me some words. And what this turned out to be is what I'm calling Ode to Dean Hart. If I may share, in my own weird way, memories of long ago with a letter received one day, applied, accepted, and excited to come to UNM School of Law. Wow, a new adventure begun. Among the first persons I met was the jolly, droll, smiling face of Dean Frederick M. Hart, whom I soon learned ran the whole place. Full of smiles and encouragement, he assured frightened students he cared, and for the next 3 toiling years, he was for us indeed faithfully there. As I speak for a class, 77, the best, the most diverse of its kind, more students of color, of culture, all more diverse of mind, more women in the place than ever before in this law school's plan, Dean Hart was an advocate for every one of us, building dreams of our futures, sweet and grand. Then, one holiday treat, a mini fruitcake, he smelled and loudly savored. He smiled, looking up at me, and from that day he favored my little baker's venture, a snack bar treat, for 3 years every day, allowing me to bake, wrap, sell, and surprise to earn my apartment rent to pay. From commercial law and contracts, UCC and more, Dean Hart's impact upon student lives took shape gently to ensure that we would be well prepared, well-rounded, and more importantly, yes, a decent bunch. We had no idea for sure how far-reaching embedded in us would be his 3-year crunch. His character and his kindness shown to all as if we were family, his integrity and high hopes for us unbounded in his joyful revelry. These are the memories deeply imprinted on our hearts, made and left by a man whose depth of care he did always smilingly impart. The legacy and litany of stories of Dean Fred Hart live on in our lives, our stories like legends no matter when or where they start, for his kind and caring hand has guided so many of us here. How can we ever document, codify, write in volumes our gazillions of memories of this man so dear? Gathering his army of faculty, ensuring for us all the best of the best, he fitted a crew who truly lived up to the moniker, the Harvard of the West. With Desi on his right hand, Lou and Kay by his sides, Peter to recruit more student minds, Joe, Ted, and Ruth, Pam, Jose, Lee, June, Bob, Ann, and Ellis, his assembly from all paths and all kinds. Jerry Walden, a legend, Emeriti profs, criminal law, American Indian law, and such. The assembly of experiences, Bill, Mike, Sam, and Leo's guided teachings of service, so much. Moot court, basketball court, balloon viewings from the law school's back porch, memories that flood of Malsa, Balsa, Ielsa, Women's Caucus, all ready to carry forth the torch. A torch of care, a rich legacy to share, embodied in a spirit of duty and light. These are the nuggets the Hart years have borne, exemplifying that which is good and that which is right. The joy in his walk, the lilt in his eyes, the love of his Joan and big family, and this and more, all rolled up in his faith, comes bubbling over in this Hart legacy. But we will try, as we live our lives continually with his joy and integrity, as we honor and pay tribute to this one who both by profession and professionally, he touched our souls with ripple effects that shall impact into infinity. Through faithful, steadfast commitment, we embody that Fred Hart meritocracy. So, we who loved him may never say goodbye to this towering giant of a man, but choose instead bid a sweet adieu until God and look again to take his hand. His substance, his smile, his spirit and heart will surely keep leading and inspiring me. And if you were blessed to have walked with him, success and joy, embodied memories, and more, surely is your future yet to be. Sweet memories, inspiring admonishments, gentle pushes to challenge, all delivered with his connective and resonating smile, hard knocks, tough times, encouraging attaboys and girls, all with love, pressing us through and pressing us forward all the while. I will always love and with joyful heart ever remember our dear eternal Dean. Along with this law school family, memories, growth, all in my heart still reign as queen. Enduring friendships, life lessons, sense of honor and community, all with the joy of Dean Hart's spirit. May these gifts endure in us as his ultimate legacy. So, thank you, dear one, for you could never know the impact you've had on so many lives that still carry and will show the mark of true worth, of faith, of kindness, of real sharing and caring, of a heart, of action, of love, heartfelt, heart love, a badge of honor well worth wearing. Heart of action, heart of love, heartfelt, a badge of honor well worth wearing. For always and to do, how you have blessed us, Dean Hart, and we thank you. And God bless you all.
Our next speaker is Placido Gomez. Plas graduated from the law school in 1985 with it. Right? During his stay at the law school, he was very active in supporting, encouraging, developing, recruiting students of color and underprivileged students with it. And I know during that time he was very close to Fred and worked very closely to Fred. In fact, I think it was Fred, Plas, that encouraged you to go to Yale and help you get to Yale to complete your master's program. Plas is now a professor and associate dean at Laverne University. He's taught at many universities. And I think it was in the late 80s, I can be wrong, Malsa's justice program honored Plas for his contributions for the support, recruitment, and help of underprivileged students and students of color. Plas?
Thank you very much, Desi. I'm honored to be here, especially among this strong panel. Listening to Sam talk reminded me of a story. I work for both Fred and Sam. And before I went to work for Fred, Sam called me into his office and told me what a great guy Fred was, but said, you know, he can be a grumpy old man. Before I went to work for Sam, Fred called me into his office. Told me about all the great things Sam did, the history of the Indian Law Center. He said, I love the guy, but he can be a grumpy old man. This is going to be on tape, so I just want to say they both were right. I wanted to talk this evening about Fred's role in instituting and developing one of the most unique aspects of the law school. For almost 50 years, until very recently, the law school has had a third-year student as a voting member of the admissions committee. What a vision. Adding the student perspective to the admissions committee helped change the composition of the New Mexico law community and made it what it is today. The model evolved from 5 demands focusing on diversity made by some MALSA members in 1975. And it was more than 35 years ago in 1985 when I first read the minutes of the December 1975 faculty meeting. So I was really surprised. I snuck into the dean's office this morning, and I pulled out, I have them here, I pulled out the minutes of faculty meetings from 1975, 1976. And I got to say, they were not quite as I remember them. The minutes I looked at this morning, the pages were numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4. But the page numbers appeared altered. In between page 3 and 4, there was a page 3.5. And that page 3.5 did not have the faded yellow color of a 50-year-old typewritten document. It was clearly done on a computer and a printer. But these are the official minutes, and I will read from them. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to start on the bottom of page 3 towards the end of the meeting. Quote, "The next order of business, the faculty considered the 5 MALSA demands." Page 3.5. They came from all directions, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 law students, past, present, and future, black, white, Asian, native, Mexican. They're chanting and carrying signs. I see signs from the cities and towns across the state. I see signs from the pueblos and Indian Nation. I see signs with family member names and signs with slogans. And as the group approached from the north across the golf course, I could see Fred Hart was right out in front, leading the agitators. He's wearing a polo shirt and blue tennis shoes. And around him are 8 kids and a bunch of grandkids and great-grandkids. And Joan pushing and pulling him, making sure he was moving forward. I could see that there were more than law students. I recognized some of the faces, New Mexico legends, icons, governors of New Mexico, governors of Indian nations and pueblos, artists, Maria Martinez, Susunkiwa, Georgia O'Keeffe, Al Hurricane, scientists, Fred Begay was there. People who made sure New Mexico always remained on a slightly different track in its own unique lane. I can now see more faces, lots of firsts. Deb Haaland, Ann Bingham, Cruz Reynoso. I see law school faculty and judges in robes. And what's that big black and blue sign? I've never seen that before. Hart Construction? They gathered outside the dean's office, where Dean Fred Hart met them and invited them in. They stayed for 40 days and 40 nights. There was crying and singing, gritos and drums, tribal drums, heartbeat drums. And they left as noisy as they had come, raising fists, chanting, beating drums. Now back to page 4. Again, faded yellow paper. Motion. It was moved and seconded that the law school, on a 1-year experimental basis, add a 3rd-year student to the admissions committee. Motion passed. 11 in favor, 1 against. I'm just reading the minutes here. I can tell you, I've looked at the minutes of the October 4th, 1976 faculty meeting, and they indicate that the law faculty approved the continuation of student representation on the admissions committee indefinitely. Indefinitely. And here we are, bunches of us, because of that. I have to tell you that when I first read the revised minutes of that December meeting, I thought for a moment. I thought, how could Fred Hart lead the agitators and at the same time welcome them as dean into his office? You just got to know the man. You got to know Fred Hart. He was committed to right, old, entrenched wrongs. And deep in his heart, he had faith and hope in people. And he put people in the position to right those wrongs. He put people at the law school so that the law school could continue its unique vision. And he put people in the position to make that vision a reality, to make New Mexico a better place to live. And then he made sure it got done. That was Fred Hart. Thank you.
Plus, I'll try to remember the one negative vote. Our next speaker is Joe Goldberg. What can I say? Joe came to the faculty in 1971. I was gone that year, but as I understand the story, right, Joe had called Fred a number of times. Joe at the time was teaching at North Dakota Law School to come. And Fred, on a number of those occasions, indicated to Joe he did not have a position. Then one day, Fred calls Joe and offers him a position. And Joe comes. Right? And Joe was a member of the faculty for, I don't know the exact dates, but approximately 20 years with it. Working closely with Fred, teaching many courses, advocating for people, not only within the law school, but for causes outside the law school. For 1 year, he was Governor Ania's Secretary of Health, or was it Human Resources, with it. I had the great privilege of teaching contracts with Joe for many years and to working with many projects. As I used to say, I just write something down, give it to Joe, and let him deal with it, because he was going to do it anyway with it. Since leaving the Joe's Law School, Joe went out into practice. He's now a partner in Friedman, Boyd, Hollander, Goldberg, and Davis. Do I have that correct? With it. Most importantly, he was very close to Fred, Joan, and the Hart family. With him. Joe?
You can see that Desi keeps a very strict watch on the clock. Fred Hart scared the hell out of me my first year in law school, and he still scares me. Thank you, Desi, for asking me to speak. I hope I can get through this. I'm going to read it, because otherwise I wouldn't get through it. I did not expect that saying something nice about Fred Hart would be such a daunting task. There is so much to say. There's so little time. In any event, is there really a way to capture what made Fred, Fred? There are many superlatives about Fred. He was a great teacher. He certainly was the best teacher I had. He taught us with deep and practical knowledge of the subject matter, enthusiasm and love for the law, and with a bag of tricks to keep our attention. I had Fred for one 2-hour course in agency and partnership in my second semester, first year of law school. He then left Boston to come to New Mexico as a visiting professor. When the students at Boston College learned that New Mexico had offered Fred a permanent position, nearly every single student in the second and third year classes at Boston College signed a petition pleading with Fred to return to Boston. I am now glad that we failed. Fred was a great dean. In his 9 years of deaning at UNM Law School, which in dean years is about 2 lifetimes, Fred was a true leader, not in a top-down, demanding way, but in his own inimitable way. Fred nurtured and cajoled the faculty to reach consensus on doing the right things. More about that to come. Fred's 9 years as dean were divided into 2 stints, 1971 through 1979, and then 1985 and 1986, with Bob Desiderio as the dean in the intervening years. From my perspective as a faculty member, those 15 years were one deaning experience. Fred, by far, conducted the best graduations I have ever attended. Every graduation was a joyous occasion. There were 2 things that stick with me about each of those graduations. First, in every single one of those graduations, without exception, Fred managed to work in a reference to Teilhard de Chardin and the Omega Point. Something only Fred could pull off. Second, in every graduation, in stark contrast to other graduations where the audience is admonished sternly, hold your applause until all the graduates are hooded, Fred invited everyone to cheer, yell, stomp, whistle when their wife or husband, son or daughter, mother or father was being hooded. Fred was a great colleague. I always refer to Fred as my mentor, only to have discovered that everyone else refers to Fred in the same way. My wife, Catherine, reminds me that one of the best qualities of Fred is that nearly everyone thinks that he or she was Fred's favorite. With all of that, Fred was a mediocre bridge player. But it definitely did not spoil his enthusiasm for the game. Fred accomplished much, and there is much about the law school and the legal profession in New Mexico that is a direct result of Fred's leadership. In 1971, Charlie Daniels and I were hired as the 14th and 15th faculty members at UNM Law School. The other faculty members were Fred, Hunter Gear, Sam Deloria, Bob Desiderio, who was on leave in Maine, left me with the entire class to teach contracts to, Hugh Muir, Walter Barnett, Henry Weihofen, Leo Kanowitz, Malcolm Sharp, Bill McPherson, Myron Fink, Bill Ellis, Ted Parnell, I didn't forget you, Ted, Al Utton, Bob Walker, and Jerry Walden. These were a great crowd of people, but as you may have noticed, they were all men, and all but one of them, with the exception of Sam Deloria, were all white men. Over the next 15 years or so, we hired Ann Bingaman, Pam Minsner, Cruz Reynoso, Helene Simpson, Jose Martinez, Leo Romero, Jim Ellis, Dick Gonzalez, Rob Schwartz, Lou Stelzner, Lee Teitelbaum, Ted Aquilino, Garrett Flickinger, Mike Norwood, Peter Winograd, Fred Ragsdale, Michelle Herman, M. Hall, Ruth Kovnat, Mike Browdy, Chuck Dumars, Ann Scales, Alfred Mathewson, and Antoinette Cedillo Lopez. These were also great people, an amazing crowd, wonderful teachers, fabulous colleagues, and more than half of them were women and/or people of color. There was a similar transformation of the student body at the law school. This was not an accident, nor was it providential. These and other major changes in the law school were a direct result of Fred Hart and his leadership. Period. Full stop. Fred was the most unassuming, unpretentious, unceremonial person I ever met. He combined this with one of the most perceptive and well-formed senses of right and wrong, period. These qualities were laid on top of, and this seems to be a subtext of this evening, an underlying grumpiness, sometimes charming, sometimes not so charming. These were the foundations of Fred's leadership style. He saw clearly what was the right thing to do and simply went about doing it. He led us, the faculty, by appealing to what was best in us and galvanized us to do and be our best. It was a great gift to experience Fred's leadership. He leaves an outstanding law school, a very special law school, an unheralded gem in the Southwest Mountain Desert, just the way Fred would have liked it. This great law school is the defining testament to Fred's leadership. Thank you, Desi.
Thank you, Joe. I was Fred's partner more times than not in those bridge games. Our next speaker is Natalie Martin. Natalie is the Associate Dean for Faculty Development and Frederick M. Hart Chair in Commercial and Clinical Law at the law school. That itself tells you a lot. Natalie came, I think, in about 1997 or 98. And she happened to be office next door to Fred. I'm not sure how the relationship started, but over the years, they developed a very, very close relationship, publishing many works together, right? Constantly discussing contracts, commercial law, consumer law with it. And I would guess each was the best defender of the other with it over those years with it. I know Natalie misses Fred deeply, as we all do with it. Natalie, come here.
I can honestly say this is the most intimidating thing I've ever had to do in my life. This is going to be a little bit lighter, I think, but I'm super humbled, and I just want to say that I'm definitely playing in the kiddie pool compared to these other speakers. But I sincerely just am grateful that all of you are here celebrating this incredible celebration of the most celebratory life any of us could ever imagine. As Desi said, Fred and I taught in the same field, and we wrote in the same field, and I had the super lucky serendipity to be seated next to him, which really did start a really miraculous and lifelong friendship. you know, to me, Fred really was the father of the law school. I know there were other deans before him, but as you've already heard tonight quite a bit about, he's really the one that molded us into the kind of place that we are, and we are so incredibly unique. A state law school that really values diversity, equity, inclusion, but most of all, just human kindness, decency, and fairness. I mean, these were Fred's values. For him, you know, diversifying the law school wasn't really about race or diversity per se. It was just about basic human dignity and respect for every single person on this earth. And you've already heard a lot about how he did what he did. I'll just add a couple more stories, but because a lot of these things happened almost instantaneously. There was a woman that walked into his office once and said, you know, we don't want all these man professors. We want a woman professor. And as I understand it, as she's walking out the door, he's picking up the phone and calling Ann Bingaman and hiring her on the spot. And I'm going to tell you another story that involves both Fred and Desi. When I got here a couple years later, there was a student, and I don't know if you remember this story, but she gave a flyer to every one of us on the faculty, and it said that she was transgender and transitioning. This was in like 1999, when these were not conversations that people were regularly having. And she said in the flyer that, you know, she was feeling very fluid and she needed her own place to use the restroom. Now, I had come from another law school that shall remain nameless. They did an empirical study to try to figure out, you know, how many of the men's rooms should be transferred to women's rooms with the, you know, arrival of all these women in law school. And I mean, it went on for like a year. Now, my recollection of what happened in this instance is that the two of them basically just drove to the Home Depot. There was no empirical study, no, you know, checking with main campus or anything like that. Got one of those, you know, gender-neutral bathroom signs and pasted it to the door on the same bathroom that we still enjoy today, right down here. So that's the kind of guy that Fred was. If something needed to be done, he was going to do it. There are children in the room, so I won't say what he would say, but, you know, doggone it. Quite a bit of swearing was going on at times, and when my husband brought his high school class to one of the classes, they said that was our best part, you know, the part we liked the best was that swearing. In any case, I'll just one other thing before I get to a couple personal anecdotes. As far as admissions go at UNM School of Law, he used to say this to all of us, so I'm not alone here, but he used to say, we should admit every student who wants to go to law school, especially the ones that none of the other law schools will take. And he also used to say, I don't give a bleep about rankings, but he didn't say bleep. Bottom line, he welcomed every human on this earth in the same way. I mean, he would treat the maintenance folks in the building the same as the faculty. And his mentorship skills have already been spoken about, but I'll just share a few words about it. He was such a privilege to be mentored by, and so many people in this room have experienced this. He was always humble to a fault, and was low-key but a very powerful leader who mentored everybody who sought out his care. All you had to do was ask him. He loved to be asked, and he loved to give advice to colleagues and also to judges. I know there are quite a few of those here as well. I'd see them going in and out of his office. And you would talk, and he would want you to talk as long as possible, just listening, you know, kind of rubbing the legs and nodding back and forth like this, and then there would be this long pause, and it was so intimidating. You were just like, is he going to say something or not? But it was just because he was so incredibly good at listening, right? He really wanted to get it before he gave that advice. And now I will tell how the relationship began. And Desi, it actually involves you. Sorry about this. I'm going to go off script a little bit. But when I first started, I was not a very good teacher. And I know some of you already know this. But a few of my students in contracts defected to the other section. And this is really, I mean, my heart was broken by this, you know. And the other teacher was Desi. So, you know, you can see why they went. But still, you know, so I thought, I'm going to just ask my neighbor here, who didn't really take that well to me in the beginning for reasons that I won't explain. But I'm just going to ask him what I think I should do, you know. So I went in there, and I was all ready to give my little talk and see what he was going to recommend. And I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Instead, I just started crying, and it was really humiliating. I just felt like such a loser on so many levels. But after that, just about every day, you know, we would talk. And a lot of it was about our families. It was about my family, which can fit in the back of a Mini Cooper, and his family, which cannot. And I used to say there were 2 seasons for Fred. There was the anticipating taking the family to Pope Joy season, which, this was really a big deal, and they definitely took up a whole section there. And then the other season was the, anticipating the trips to Lake Powell season, where it would take many joyful weeks to plan those trips, and he just loved that so much. Over the years, we taught so many classes together, and our styles were a bit different. People have mentioned the grumpiness, I believe. At times, he could be just a little bit gruff, and so maybe some of you students experienced where he would say to them, yeah, that was a stupid question. And then I would incredibly overcompensate for this to the point where he would say to me, I think you'd rather confuse 40 people than tell one person that he or she is wrong. And I still do this sometimes, In the first class that we taught together, which was secured transactions, we got a really low score on one of the evaluations. And as you can see, I take these things kind of personally. We got straight 1s, and then the person wrote, that's the lowest you can get. The person wrote, and I quote, "They bickered for 14 weeks straight." Well, he just thought this was hilarious. I was horrified, but he was like, come on, that's the whole point of law school. Ambiguity is great. They should walk in here, they should walk out of here more confused than they were on the way in. So he said, and if they didn't, then why do they need to spend 3 years here? They need to learn how to think. I got a lot of other funny stories. I'm sure my 5 minutes is up, so I'll just finish with this. His gruffness, I believe, was a bit of an act. I don't know if the family agrees with this. But my best example is, some of you know I usually have a dog with me, almost always. Don't have her today. But he would pretend to not like dogs. This was his shtick, that he didn't like dogs. And I had this shirt, it was from Life is Good, and it had a little dog head sticking out of a Jeep. And then it said, "Dog gone," at the bottom. How they have those cute phrases on them. And he'd say, "Yeah, that's the way I like dogs, gone." And then I would see him, petting. And then I would say, "Please, I beseech you, do not give food to these dogs. They have kidney failure. They're old." And I'd see him, And the thing is, you can't tell him what to do, right? Family? Yeah, ever. Except one person could. Right? He didn't like to be told what to do, but Joan, of course, only she could do that. So if I say don't feed the dog, what's he going to do? Feed the dog. Okay, on a more serious note now, wrapping up, Fred's heart, his knowledge, and his experience, both at work and at home, really carried so many of us for so long. At work, he had this vast institutional knowledge, and at home, his marriage was the true role model for all of us. He and Joan were so incredibly close, and she was his rock, his beacon, his number one always. And his kids and his grandkids, one of whom we're going to hear from very soon, were also his pride and joy. He always knew what every single one was doing, and not just that, how they were doing. All of us here on the faculty know how fortunate we have been to know Fred and to learn from him. But that doesn't alleviate the pain of his passing, which has left a huge hole in our spirits, one that's never really going to be refilled. Our community has lost our rudder in Fred, but he is still here in spirit. So I say farewell to our rock, but this is not goodbye, Fred. We still need you here at UNM School of Law. You still have so much to tell us, and we have so much to learn from you. May Fred's legacy of excellence, equity, inclusion, collegiality, and collaboration be with us forever as a law school. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Natalie. Our final speaker for the family is Fred and Joan's grandson, Michael Hart. Michael took contracts twice from me, I think. He was in my class the first time, and then the next year when Fred and I taught it, he was there every day with Fred. You would always see Michael with Fred around the law school helping him. Michael?
Thank you. Thank you, Desi. I'll start by saying if Natalie Martin thinks that she's in the kiddie pool in this group, I have no idea where I stand. But I appreciate being here. My name is Frederick Michael Hart, and I'm one of Fred's grandsons. I want to start by saying that I'm honored to have the opportunity to speak in front of such an incredible community. And thinking about what to say tonight, I thought mostly of the people that would be here. And even though that I've known him my whole life, many of you have known my grandpa Fred for much, much longer. And although I did not know him for as long as many of you did, I was able to share a remarkable experience with him, one that I had wanted for many years before attending this law school. I recently graduated just this last May. And as Desi just told you, I was able to watch him teach contracts with his friend Desi. I was able to take his Contracts 2 course, and I was able to spend time with him virtually every day. I was privileged to be with him when he taught his last class here, just, I guess, 2 years ago now. And when he was 91 years old, I was able to sit with him during that. And through that, I cherish that. But also for my entire life, I, along with the rest of my family, was with him every Sunday night when we'd gather for family dinner just down the street at what we call the Big House. His 8 children, their spouses, and 20-some-odd grandchildren, we would always start dinner by saying grace. My grandfather would sit at one of the heads of the table, and he'd call us out by name. We would respond by saying something that we were grateful for. This process was like attendance at class, making sure we were all present and sitting, making sure that we were sitting mindful. And the call would go around the table, first the adults and then the kids' table. And after all were called, he would look across to the other head of the table, towards my grandma Joan. And her response, as consistently as anything I've ever known, was, "Thank you for your many blessings. Keep us all safe and well." My grandfather would then close with a loud and final amen, which was the unanimous signal that we could begin to eat. And looking back, not once was he called on to share what he was thankful for. It is one of my only regrets, never asking him to share. I used to think about doing so, but never did. Probably because I lacked the confidence to speak out of turn or cause a disruption during this sacred event. But in thinking about what I should say tonight, I tried to think about what he might say if he had one final opportunity to address this community. I would tell you that he would have expressed nothing but affection and nothing but gratitude. First, to the faculty here, who shared his vision and who took a chance embracing ideas that were both ambitious and challenging, believing that together they could do something profound and courageous, but necessary here in New Mexico. Holding doors open that had been closed to so many for so long. And today he would be giving thanks to you. And to the thousands of students who came through the doors while he was here, those who wanted to become lawyers and those who were willing to work hard enough to get there. The students were undoubtedly his passion. He truly believed that in a community that embraces diversity and opportunity, that students would learn as much from each other as they would from their teachers. And so to all of his students, he would say thank you. To the principles that have guided this school for generations, and the commitment to those principles for the generations to come, he would be giving thanks. And I know one thing to be certain. The rest of it's just guessing what he would say. But if he were here, he would not leave this podium without thanking my grandma Joan, about whom he often said, and I quote, "I would have never amounted to anything without her." And he actually believed that. and it very, very well may be true. Attending this law school and seeing what has been built here will forever be one of my most fortunate blessings. Having had that experience made me realize that this group, if you commit to it, can truly become your family. And there was nothing more important to my grandfather than his family. And those who knew him knew that to be true. On behalf of my grandfather, I know that he would say that the faculty here were family. Each of the students here were family. And from the Hart family, I can say that we all knew that. So on behalf of my grandfather and the entire Hart family, we are grateful for all the friendship and the support, and most importantly, the love that he received from this community while he was here. Thank you.
At this time, we invite you to share with us your memories and stories of Fred. There are 2 microphones there, and we asked you, if you'd like to make a comment, to queue up. 1 minute. We ask that you hold your comments to 1 minute so that everyone gets a chance to say what they would like to say.
To introduce myself, I am Sam W.D. Johnson, a bicentennial law school graduate of 1976, the only African-American male. Today I come here to share a tribute really to Mother Hart. It was my godmother. I say, well, who is Dean? He's just your dean. I'm your godmother. So I've become family. The PBS want to do February 2020 a documentary on Dean Fred Hart, because Dean Fred Hart is the father of the black law student civil rights movement of the 70s. It started August 73. Barbara Brown Simmons was the first black female to be admitted, and I was the second black. And he wrote a letter to the National Convention that we were a Black American law student chapter. As a result, at the National Convention, Barbara and I, with the support of Dean Hart, we were able to change the Constitution and law based on membership, where the Rocky Mountain region would only have 1 vote per chapter. Thus said, Barbara Brown came back as being Rocky Mountain Region Director. Rocky Mountain Region is the largest region, going from Texas to Nebraska and from Wyoming to Montana. There was a number of things that happened during that time. Barbara was able to be the first black female to graduate from Union Law School and the first black female to pass the bar. Next, I was elected Rocky Mountain Regional Director. Dean Hart hosted the executive board meeting here for 1 week. His office, the conference office was next to his office. Judge Hatcher and many of us that were on the executive board member had a situation that we had to resolve with the support of Dean Hart. We were having problems getting in the moot court competition. Thus said, the Frederick Douglass moot court competition was conceived right here in the conference room, and now is one of the world-leading minority law school moot competition in the American system. After graduation, Dean Hart saw a need to increase more black students. Of course, most people don't know during the CLEO program, Dean Hart, through the National Bar Association and the American Bar Association, got separate funding to add 6 students, which included Marshall Hardiman, and 5, it was 7, but only 6 came, that once they go through the program, they were automatically admitted to the law school. Thus said, now we have 7 black law students. That was the first time Boston was able to have pure officer, and Marsh Head was one of the ones that were elected president. But also, during that tenure, when he hired me to be a recruiter for black law students, teaching course Central LaCare, and also dealing with teaching a course, thus by race, racism, and American law, Dean Hart sacrificed 4 semesters, 2 years, to travel on the main campus and teach a course, race, racism, American law, with me from 12 to 1:15. I'm closing out now. The next regional director, Rocky Mount Regional Director, was Tommy Jewell, one that I was able to recruit, thus coming the first black judge in the state, and his wife, Angela Juzane Jewell, becoming the first black female. Thus said Michael Finney, that Desi had the opportunity to give his stone. I became Rocky Mountain Regional Director, and he is the Senior Chief Justice of the Navy Corps Criminal Justice System. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Manny?
I used to be 5'8", but now I'd just like to share something as quick as I can. I met Fred Hart by accident. I had always wanted to be a lawyer, and I applied to the University of New Mexico School of Law and waited anxiously for my acceptance into this law school, and I received a letter denying me entrance. And that didn't sit well. I said, well, I really want to go. So I went to at Bratton Hall, the old building, and asked to see the dean. The dean was Dean Christopher. And he saw me, and I went in, and I talked to him, and I said, you know, I received this letter, and I really want to go to law school. I always thought about it. He said, yeah, but, you know, we have over 800 applicants, and the GPA and the LSAT, the things that some people talked about here, I said are very important. And I said, yeah, I know, but I really, just begging. And he didn't know what to do. He said, maybe I can help you get into St. Mary's Law School or Denver. And I said, I'd appreciate the help, but I have a problem. I'm married. I have a 1-year-old child, and my wife's pregnant again, so I'm going nowhere. With that kind of load on my back, having no way to go. I said, so I really would hope that, and at that time, because they were all faculty members, all of a sudden the door opened to his office and in stepped Fred Hart. And Christopher just wanted me to get out of there. He said, Fred, I have this young man here that really wants to go to law school, but he doesn't have the credentials we're asking for, and do you know of any way that he might be able to go to law school? He said, yeah, there's a new program called CLEO. Let me talk to him. He said, okay, take him. So I went, and Council of Legal Education Opportunity was established to help minorities get into law school at that time. And it required just 2 things. It required the school to guarantee you a slot in the next class if they recommended and they thought that you could be a lawyer or make it to school. And secondly, that you had to go out of town I went to Tempe, to Arizona State University for 2 months. 10 days after this meeting, Fred got me into the program, and I went to the program, and thank God they recommended me, and I had my slot in the school. So we came back here, and it was first year in the old Bratton building, and David Friedman, John Boyd, and a lot of people that are in big law firms now were in my class, and I already had a little bit of a political bug anyway, so they said, we need a class representative. Anybody want it? I didn't have any opposition. It was a good election that way. So I became first year class student body representative. And Christopher had already left, and all of a sudden the buzz in that year was saying, well, we don't have to get a new dean. And so they, at the middle of the first semester, we moved to this school for the first time. That dean office hadn't been occupied by anybody since Christopher had gone back to Alabama. God bless him. And so they formulated a search committee. And at the university level, you always hear that. We need a national search. We need a national search. We got to get somebody with a big name that'll bring that raises the level of the law school here because of the person we get. And they were talking about certain names back here and back. And then they started to really coin in on one single person. Guy's name, I remember it like if it was yesterday. It was the Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court, Justice Traynor was his name. And he had just retired. So they were all talking, we got to go and ask Justice Traynor because that would bring a lot of credibility to this law school. And I'm sitting there, I don't know what I'm talking about. I said, well, this is the dean for this school, and I don't know anything about Justice Traynor, and I don't think you guys know much except that he retired. But he has no experience in this thing. And I think we need somebody local. And I said, yeah, but this is a national search. I said, well, everybody here in this room is part of the nation. I mean, as far as I know. And I'm going to make a motion with my voice trembling like this. I move that Fred Hart be made dean of the law school. Oh, we can't do that. Oh, we can't. That's not right. We have to search. And I said, well, I think we got to vote. And I think he had a lot of friends in that room because Fred Hart was elected dean of the University of New Mexico School of Law that day, and he was the first one to occupy that office over there. And I'll always be grateful for Dean Hart.
Thank you, man.
Mary Ann D'Arcangelis, and I'm a musician that went to law school late and graduated in 2000. To say that he was very supportive is really an understatement, and I just want to share a flash that I see every time I think about him, and that beautiful searing light in those blue eyes of his that could see your brain and your soul at the same time and put them together and appreciate it when he's talking to you. I just remember that. And I was just watching, and this is to the family, really, and I was just seeing people come in, and I see those blue eyes, and it just struck me. So that's really all I wanted to share, was just a human thing. So.
I'm Ron Siegel, class of 1972. I still have at home the letter that Fred signed in January or February of 1969, admitting me to law school for the fall. It came special delivery. It came in the evening about 6 o'clock. Only time in my life I've ever gotten anything by special delivery. But the story I wanted to tell has to do with, I think it was our second year of law school. Fred had just become the dean. And the day before classes started, there was a mixer for all of the law students and the faculty. It was held somewhere in Corrales, maybe the Territorial House. And when you came in, you had to fill out your own little name tag, and what you were supposed to do was just put your first name and your class year. So we all dutifully did that, except for Fred, whose name tag did not say Fred Hart, did not say Dean Hart, did not say Dean. It said Fred, and the year was 1/2. That's how unpretentious he was.
Thank you, Ron. Anyone else? Randy?
Yeah, Randy McGinn, class of 1980. And whenever I get discouraged about the state of the world and think that one person can't make a difference, I remember Fred, although he really had help, it's really two people made a difference. So it was Fred and Joan. And it sure made a difference in the life of a young law student, Charles Daniels, who showed up the first day of class having not read the materials. And like a laser, Fred found him and called on him, and of course, as all law students do, he tried to bluff his way out of the question. And for the entire hour, Fred grilled him and humiliated him in front of the rest of the students. And everybody ran out so that they couldn't get called on, and as Charlie was gathering up his things to slink out himself, he said when he got out, he saw walking up the hall, Fred, whistling and throwing his chalk up and catching it and throwing his chalk up and catching it. And he said he never came unprepared for class ever again, and Fred never called on him the rest of the semester. 5 years after law school, Fred would call Charlie when he was teaching law school at Howard University and invite him back here to be a law professor at UNM, where he started with Joe Goldberg as young law professors. But most important for me is when my love was dying of ALS. The one person he wanted to spend time with was Fred Hart, and Michael brought Fred over. Fred was on oxygen, and they sat in our living room for an hour, these two men telling each other how much they cared about each other and how much they had meant to each other through their whole life. Michael, it was really something, wasn't it? And that's the person that Fred was. And the death of both of them has me thinking, what lasts beyond us? And the thing that lasts are the kindnesses you see that you show to other people and what you teach them, and the fact that when you go, you build an army to carry on your work after you're done. And that was Fred.
Thank you, Ren. Anyone else? Well, thank you all. If you give me an indulgence for 1 minute. Fred has been part of my professional life, my whole life. I say, 3/4 of my life have been spent working with, being friends of, being a partner with, taking trips with Fred. As all of you, I miss him. I think of him almost daily. And whenever I have an issue or question, I say to myself, self, what would Fred do? I say, but I am comforted to know that Fred will always be with me and with us. He permeates this building. His spirit, his sense of inclusion, his sense of social justice, his sense of community, all right, are what he gave us and what are us in this building. We honor him, but we must also dedicate ourselves, right, to retain that spirit that Fred has given us, to make sure this law school always fulfills the mission of Fred Hart. Thank you. Please join us in a reception that follows so we can continue to share our memories and stories of Fred.